Hey everybody, welcome to the UFC Fight Night Thompson versus Till Aftermath. And great fight card. I mean, a lot of finishes, some submissions, right? Some knockouts, and some comebacks. But after their decision was rendered for the main event, it seems like that's all anyone can talk about. And a vast majority of the people feel like Wonderboy won. Fighters included, whose opinions are probably the most important, right? Because they do this for a fucking living. And they're able to analyze what's going on in the octagon the best. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's start off with some news. Most of you have probably already heard this, but Nick Diaz was arrested for domestic violence. I think I read something about he might have put his hands on the neck of a woman, or I don't really know. I'm going to wait for more details to come out about this. I think the UFC said they're launching their own private investigation, so I don't want to comment about it until, we have all the fucking details and facts laid out in front of us, but just throwing it out there for you guys' awareness. Like, unless you guys have been living under a fucking rock, I'm sure you've heard about that. It made headlines everywhere. We didn't talk a whole lot about it leading up to it, which I fucking should have because it deserved it. But the Bellator 200 card was phenomenal. Bellator's putting on some really good fights lately. And that their whole main card, and the whole card in general, I mean, Phil Davis won via knockout on the prelims, but all 5 fights were phenomenal. Kate Jackson was the only decision on the card when she fought Yankova, and she picked up a dominant decision win. Shipman knocked out Noon in 11 seconds. Chalmers beat Griffiths via... How the fuck did he beat him? Did he choke him out? I think he choked him out in the first or second round. I can't remember. Musasi took the title from Carvalho, which I think everyone was kind of expecting, right? I mean, when you look at Gegard Mousasi, you're talking about a high-level UFC competitor. I mean, no doubt he was in the title contention in the UFC at 185 pounds. He beat Chris Weidman in that. I mean, there was some fuckery in that and some questionable shit going down, but regardless, I mean, Mousasi is a top of the food chain type of dude. He's a fucking animal. So I think most people expected him to go in and steal the title, but the performance that everyone is talking about is Michael Venom Page, who made Rickles quit. I mean, he literally was like, I think he had a really bad cut, and it probably was affecting his, it probably opened up and started spilling into his eye pretty immediately. But Jesus Christ, man, you don't see many people quit, and especially a guy like Rickles. And it wasn't just that Michael Venom Page made him quit, it was the way he did it. It was like watching a grown man fight a child. Like a full-grown man fight a little kid. It was unfucking believable. I mean, MVP just had a read on everything Rickles was going to throw. Was too fast for him, too quick for him. And MVP is a guy who, if you watched Wonderboy and Till fight this past weekend, which if you're watching this, you probably did, MVP and Wonderboy have very similar styles. Hands down, wide stances, switching it up. They kind of blitz in at you in that karate fashion. And man, the thing about MVP is I think he might tell. I'm not saying he's better than Wonderboy, because I think Wonderboy is one of the most elite strikers in the world, right? But MVP does some shit that I'm not sure Wonderboy can do. At least not as explosively. I mean, if you looked at what MVP, the way he caved in Cyborg's head with that flying knee, he's so explosive in ways that I'm not sure Wonderboy is. And he doesn't telegraph things. I think there was a moment in the first round where he threw a spinning, like a spinning head kick at Rickles, and it wasn't telegraphed at all. I mean, it was just like boom. I don't think he's quite as explosive as Barboza, but MVP is kind of like a combination of Edson Barboza and Wonderboy Thompson, right? He's got that strange style with the wide stance, and he covers distance very well, but he's also explosive. Very explosive. He's a hard guy to deal with, and I think he's going to start fighting some of the... I mean, Rickles was a tough fight, don't get me wrong, but I'd really like to see MVP start fighting guys like Paul Daly. Their stand-up is very credentialed, don't really like to go to the ground. I'd like to see him get tested against a top-tier guy like that. Paul Daly's a motherfucker, man. That'd be a great fight, and you might be looking at the most talented guy in Bellator's division. I always say that's Michael Chandler, but if there's a very good argument, well, not yet. Michael Chandler still holds that crown, right? But man, Michael Venom Page is making a case for himself. If he keeps it up, it's going to be hard to debate that he's not the best fighter in the entire Bellator organization. I don't think that's far-fetched at all if he continues what he's doing. And then other major announcement is that the UFC is exclusively partnered with ESPN to host their prelims for pay-per-view events. They're going to have 10 fights? I think they're going to have something like 10 fights, like full fight cards on ESPN or ESPN2. The prelims for their pay-per-view events will be hosted on ESPN, and they have like 20 fight cards that are going to be hosted on ESPN Plus. It's kind of like the equivalent of UFC's UFC Fight Pass, right? It's their digital streaming service, and you have to pay $5 a month for it. But I personally think it's a great deal for the UFC, and especially for the fighters, who if ESPN plays this right, they're going to get a lot more exposure than they were on Fox. ESPN is the worldwide leader in sport. Like, that's their slogan, right? And it's 100% true. And as long as you have this is the caveat, though, right? If you have the wrong guys talking about this and promoting it, it's not going to really, I don't think it's going to be a massive difference other than the fact that it's on ESPN. But if you put the right guys in position to talk about the fights, and actually people with some exposure to the MMA world, right? If you can get them talking about it and analyzing the fights and everything, like, I think the Fox Sports crew that they have with like Kenny Florian, Daniel Cormier, Karen Brown, I think they're phenomenal. If you can get that type of talent analyzing the fights on a major network like ESPN, they're going to be just fine. I mean, it's going to be great for the fighters. Just as far as exposure, right? Like, it does nothing but the UFC but help it grow. I mean, just the fact that they announced that they're partnering up with ESPN is a big deal. So wait till the fights actually start taking place on their network. I think it's great. I bet the fighters are fucking amped about it, because as nice as a platform as Fox has been for them, it's just not on the level that ESPN is. All right, so predictions for this fight. I didn't do a breakdown, but I posted a little fucking thing on the Mixed Martial Analysis Instagram page about who I thought was going to win. I took Spicely, Silva. Silva was the last minute addition, because who got knocked off the main card? Someone was supposed to fight and got knocked off, like, last minute. I can't fucking remember who it was off the top of my head. Anyway, I took Silva over Taleb. I thought Jason Knight was going to pick up a victory over Americana. I picked Allen, who had a crazy fucking comeback, because he was probably going to lose that fight. Took Magny, and I took Darren Till. So I went 4-2 on this card. I can't remember what I am overall. I'm going to have to look, and I mean, when you guys watch this, I mean, I'm just recording right now, but when I go back and edit it, I'll put the overall title like somewhere down here, some shit, right? So you can see what the record is so far this year. I can't remember it. But I'll walk you through why I picked who I did real quick. So with Eric Spicely versus Stewart was a guy who if you noticed in that fight, he's aggressive. He's got good boxing and everything. He's got a really good stand-up game, but he likes to push people up against the cage. And I thought with Eric Spicely, that was going to be a real problem, because Spicely is phenomenal. He has a really good ground game, and I thought he'd be able to drag Stewart down. But Stewart displayed excellent takedown defense. I thought he looked as good in this fight, better in this fight than he has in any other of his octagon appearances. He's a guy who you can't help but feel happy for, right? Because he picked up a win and got disqualified for an illegal headbutt or some shit, and he had lost 3 in a row. And I mean, he's probably on the chopping block if he doesn't win this fight. Like, if he loses this fight to Eric Spicely, he's probably cut from the UFC roster. So it was a big win for him. I just felt like Spicely was going to be a little bit too much for him, and I thought Spicely would be able to drag it to the ground. But that wasn't the fucking case at all. Stewart looked phenomenal, much improved. And, hats off to him, because he's earned his way back into the, you know what I mean? He's earned himself another fight in the UFC at least. Like, he's got a chance to prove himself a little bit further. For the Silva fight, I just fucking threw a guess out there. I only watched the fights for the main card, so I was just guessing, because like I said, this was the last minute addition. I forget who the fuck was supposed to fight here. It's going to drive me fucking nuts. But I just picked Silva just, on a whim, and it was a good fight, because Nordine Taleb is very good. And he had control of that fight in the beginning until Silva kind of took over and locked in the choke. Americana versus Knight. I took Jason Knight just because I felt like Jason Knight was going to be... And I was kind of right. I thought Jason Knight, when they went to the ground, was going to be able to utilize the rubber guard that he likes to pull in mission control. He loves mission control. And I just thought that Americana might be able to get to the fight to the ground, but wasn't going to really be able to offer him anything, like not be able to do anything. So I gave the edge to Knight in that one. Judges saw it differently. For Allen versus Bernal, I was wrong I thought Allen was going to win that fight in a decision from beginning to end just based off quickness. his tenacity, and he's a really hard guy to take down, but Bernal was landing the takedown repeatedly. He didn't give up on it early when it was failing him. He was shooting the shots in open space and able to drag it to the ground and dominated for 2.5 rounds right until Allen caught that choke. So big win for Allen. Allen's only lost like one fight, man. He's on a fucking tear right now. I want to say he's won like 5 or 6 in a row in the featherweight division, so he's going to start getting some pretty big names here soon. Neil Magny versus Craig White. How do you pick against Neil Magny in this situation? He's supposed to fight Gunnar Nelson. He's getting this guy in Craig White who has never had a UFC fight. He's got an okay record. He was like 14 or 15-7 coming into this, but Neil Magny has fought some of the best in the division. I mean, he's beat Johnny Hendricks, Hector Lombard, right? And lost to some top guys. He just beat Carlos Condit, but I think he's lost to Damian Maia, Rafael dos Anjos. So, to me, just the exposure that Magny has had alone to high-level talent was just going to be too much for White to overcome, and that proved to be true, right? Magny is fucking good, man. I mean, he's really good, and his gas tank is endless. Like, if you saw him, the energy that it takes, like, all the excitement that it takes to finish a guy has got to be overwhelming, right? Like, and when all that adrenaline dumps out of you, you almost see fighters like they start breathing, and Magny was just sitting on his fucking stool after he finished him like it was no big deal. And Darren Till versus Thompson. I took Darren Till just because, I mean, the odds were kind of leaning in his favor since he missed weight. I think now we're at, 8-1, including Till. The fighters who have missed weight have gone so far this year. Like, we were 6-0 going into the card, so I was like, man. Well, and Till is very good, and he's aggressive. And I thought that just his pure size in general was going to be a lot for Thompson to deal with. Add all that into the fact that they're fighting in Liverpool. I just thought it was going to be hard for Thompson to walk away with the win because I didn't see Thompson finishing him, but I saw Till maybe finishing Thompson, right? And since they didn't, this is kind of how I saw the fight playing out. I didn't think it was going to be overly exciting unless someone really starts to open up against Stephen Thompson, but that's when you get fucked up. Like, if you're going to come in aggressive against a guy like Wonderboy, you gotta mind your P's and Q's because you're going to get pieced up if you don't. I mean, his ability to counter and lure you into traps and throw these feints and just get reads on you is fucking incredible. So I thought Till fought a good fight. I think he fought the kind of fight that you have to fight against Wonderboy if you want to be successful. You can't overextend on things. You got to march them down. I mean, people are going back and forth about this. We'll get to this decision. We'll get to it a little bit later. Let's go through the actual results of the fight. So Darren Stewart knocked out Eric Spicely in the second round in a fight like I said, man, I thought that he was going to struggle a lot just with the size. Spicely's, he's a big guy. He's a fucking phenomenal athlete on the ground. His jiu-jitsu is really good, and I just thought that if it went to the ground, because Stewart's been tapped out before in his career. So I thought that it was going to be a little bit too much for him to overcome, but he proved me wrong. Hats off to him. Like I said, I mean, he went out there and put on a striking clinic, wasn't afraid to push the fight up against the fence. Like, he wasn't afraid to go wherever the fight was going to go. It's not like he was trying desperately to avoid staying up against the fence or anything. I thought he fought a smart fight and was able to pick up a second-round finish. That's probably going to land him a guy who probably not a big name yet, right? Like, he's not going to crack the top 15 with that, especially because he's coming off 3 losses in a row. But Carl Robertson just lost at the last pay-per-view event that was headlined by Amanda Nunes and Raquel Pennington. Carl Robertson is a guy who was also on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, so he's got a little bit of a name behind him, but he's coming off a loss. And I think these two would have some fun on the feet. So look for Darren Stewart to fight a guy like that. Probably not a ranked guy. Like, he's not going to crack the top 15 after that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a great win, but he's rebounded, but now he's got to continue that momentum, right? And I think a guy like Carl Robertson makes a lot of sense for both. That fight makes sense for both Robertson and him. For Eric Spicely, I don't know, man. Maybe a guy who fought in the prelims like Bradley Scott. You're not going to see him fight a big name either, because I think coming into this fight, Spicely had lost 2 in a row. Granted, I mean, one of the guys that he lost to was Antonio Carlos Jr. Am I fucking saying his name right? That sounds right. Antonio. Yeah, I think that's I don't know why his name's not coming to me right now. But he lost in a fight where he did okay, But when you go to the ground with Carlos Jr., I mean, you're talking about an accomplished black belt who's won world titles in jiu-jitsu. I mean, if your game is going to the ground, Carlos Jr. is not the guy that you want to do it against. And I forget who he lost to before that, but Spicely's kind of been put into a must-win situation now because, like I said, I think he's just dropped 3 in a row. So I'd expect him to get a guy like Bradley Scott, someone along those lines, right? Claudio Henrique de Silva overcame an early swarming from Nordine Taleb and was able to finish it with a rear naked choke. Nordine Taleb's a good fighter, man, but I would expect to see him fight someone like Emil Meek, someone with not a ton. I think Emil Meek's like 9-3, and he just lost recently to Kamaru Usman, right? So I think that fight makes sense. And this is the hardest part for me, is picking these fucking fights, because it's so hard to keep. There's so many fighters on the roster, and I mean, I'm obviously the same way as everyone. You're more familiar with the higher level talent, right? And when you start getting deep, it's so hard to keep track of who's booked for a fight and who's lost this fight and who's won this fight. But for Nordine Taleb, like I said, maybe a guy like Emil Meek, and for Henrique de Silva, I don't know, man. That performance might earn him a top 15 shot, just because I think he's only lost one fight, and he just picked up a finish. So you might get to see him fight a guy along the lines of like Alex Cowboy Oliveira. I don't know. I don't think that fight's. I don't think that's a far-fetched fight. I think he's got to start cracking the top 15 pretty soon because he's been on a tear. Mach 1 Americana versus Jason Knight, to me, was the most interesting fight, and probably the main event was probably the hardest to score, right? And there's the most controversy over it. But I thought that this one was very controversial because I think Jason Knight got clipped in the first round. And then Jason Knight came back and knocked Americana down twice. So how do you score that? Probably 10-9, right? But the question was, for the next 2 rounds, Americana obviously dominated. I don't want to say dominated, but was able to put the fight on the floor. But once you're there and Jason Knight is establishing rubber guard and he's got mission control on you, in my opinion, I mean, I favor jiu-jitsu, obviously, because I practice it and I appreciate wrestling and everything, but to me, Jason Knight was controlling the fight on the ground and threatening. To me, the threat is what wins him the rounds. Like, if I'm a judge in that fight, I give it to Jason Knight. I thought he won the first clearly. Second probably went to Americana, but in the third round, I just didn't feel like Americana was doing anything except going to the ground. And yes, he was able to dictate where he wanted the fight to take place, but once he got to where the fight wanted to take place, he wasn't able to do anything with it. To me, Jason Knight was the one controlling and threatening. He was just sitting in his guard. He passed a side control a couple times, I guess, but I think a fight like that's very tough to score, and it probably depends. Part of the problem and part of the beauty of judging MMA is that it's subjective. Different people are going to have different. That's why you need more judges, though. Like, 3 just isn't enough. The idea that 3 people are enough to determine the outcome of a fight is, in my opinion, it's ludicrous. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. And the 10-point scoring system is so fucking stupid. But I really felt like if I'm judging that, I'd probably give it to Jason Knight. I just thought he did more. I thought he controlled the positions better. I thought he threatened more. It was a close fight, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying Americana didn't deserve. This is one of those fights where you can't bitch about the judging. I don't think so, at least, because I thought it was so fucking close. It's just going to depend on whether you value top control more or whether you value the fact that Jason Knight was attacking and controlling off of his back. Whatever one of those beliefs, you know what I mean, make up the foundation of your scoring is how you're going to lean. So if you're a wrestler, you probably thought Americana won that fight hands down. But for me, I just felt like Jason Knight was doing such a good job at Americana put the fight on the floor, and then Jason Knight dictated what happened on the floor, more or less, right? Very tough fight. I'm not saying Americana didn't deserve it in any way, shape, or form. And how fucking tough is that kid to get knocked down like he did in the first round and be able to come back and pick up a win? And I felt like Jason Knight kind of fucked up. I thought he hurt him, and I felt like when he hurt him, he thought that the submission was going to be a guarantee because he hopped on it, tried to pull guard, and I'm like, man, you should have just... Because how many opportunities in that fight are you going to have to get a guy like Americana on his back? Because you're probably not going to be the one doing the takedowns, right? you're probably going to be fighting off your back the entire time and trying to transition and get some type of reversal to end up on top. But when you knock him down twice in the same round within maybe a minute of each other, you've got to capitalize on that and get on top of him. I thought that was his biggest mistake. I think he had a really good opportunity. I mean, Americana was fucking hurt. No doubt. He was wobbling, and his feet weren't all underneath him. He wasn't all there. And to pull guard like he did and try to attempt a submission against a really good wrestler, thought it was just a lapse in judgment. But I mean, Jason Knight's a guy who's had so much success on the ground and off of his back that he probably didn't think it was a bad idea. I just think that when you hurt a guy like that and you have an opportunity to put a wrestler like Mach 1 on his back, capitalize on that shit, try to put him away. Regardless, very good fight. It puts Americana in a good position because I think he lost to Arnold Allen, right? But he's only lost like 3 fights, and you're probably going to see him maybe fight a guy like Calvin Kattar now. Whereas with Jason Knight, man, he's in a tough spot because when he came in and was beating guys like Chad Skelly, like he was also, Jason Knight has very fundamental stand-up. Like, it's fundamental Muay Thai, and it works. He's a good striker. He's very good on the ground. His specialty is obviously his jiu-jitsu, right? Like, if you watch him, he's got some shit going on. But he's lost 3 in a row now. I mean, I don't know if a guy like Jason Knight's on the chopping block now. I think he's in a must-win situation, but he's so exciting. How do you cut him from the UFC roster? All of his fights are always so fun, but you can't drop 4 in a row. 3 in a row is bad enough. But I mean, that's not always indicative of how your entire career is going to go. Just because you've dropped 3 fights in a row doesn't mean that you're done. You just got to fucking go back to I wouldn't even say go back to the drawing board with him. I think that he finishes that fight in the first round. If he just, little lapse in judgment might have cost him the fight there. But, I mean, guys like Michael Chandler have gone on 3 fight skids, and look at him. Like I said, probably the best fighter in Bellator, right? Maybe the best fighter in the fucking world. I mean, there's a very good argument for it. He's not in the 155-pound division, at least. I mean, we're never going to know until we see him fight the UFC-level talent. Guys like Khabib and guys like Conor, because he beat Eddie Alvarez, and Eddie Alvarez beat him. I mean, Michael Chandler's a motherfucker, man. But my point is that this 3-fight skid that Knight has been on has been a tough one, but it doesn't have... And also, you got to think they threw him Ricardo Lamas. I mean, I know that Josh Emmett was able to pull off the victory over him, but Jesus Christ, man, Lamas is a killer. I mean, I didn't think that was the right move to give Jason Knight Ricardo Lamas. He's a motherfucker to deal with, and he's easily top 5, right? I mean, he got clipped in that Josh Emmett fight, but Ricardo, he's a fucking animal. That's a very tough fight to take when you're floating around the top 15. That was just too much too soon for him. Jason Knight has just got to go out, focus on your next fight, get a win. You're going to be fine. He's got a lot of potential and a lot of talent. One thing I do want to see more from, I'm spending a lot of time on these guys, but I'm a big Jason Knight fan. I think he's exciting. He needs to move his head a little more, right? It wasn't such a big deal on the Americana fight because I think his striking was a little bit superior to his, but you see him get tagged a lot when he's not. He's kind of stiff when he throws his combos. If he can get a little bit more flowy and get his head moving around, he's going to be a very hard guy to deal with in the featherweight division. Arnold Allen was able to defeat Mads Bernal in the 3rd round with a front choke, and in a fight that he was losing. When I went into this fight, I thought that Bernal was going to have a very tough time dragging Allen to the mat. I just thought Allen, like I said earlier, I felt like he was too quick, and he would get his back off the cage, and man, Bernal found a path, right? And he stuck to it for two and a half rounds. I mean, and then Allen though sinks that choke in, and now he's on a 5 or 6 fight win streak, and he's going to start fighting some real talent at 145. Man, I don't really know who he's going to get though. I mean, I don't even know if he's ranked. I know he got in some trouble with he got into like a brawl or something like a couple years ago where like 6 people were hurt and 5 of them were women. I don't know all the details of it. I just like saw a headline about that or something. I've like read an article, but I wasn't able to actually. I don't know if it was him hitting him or if he was just hitting the girls or if he was just involved in some type of brawl and they were injured as a result of it. Like, I don't know. I don't know all the fucking details, but I think that's why he hasn't fought in a while, right? And Davey Grant was supposed to fight I can't remember the other guy's name. Davey Grant was the guy who was supposed to fight instead of Claudio Henrique Silva. I don't know what just made me think of that, but it just popped in my head. That was who was supposed to fight on the main card. But anyway, Arnold Allen, man, he's a tough guy, and he's gonna start fighting some top tier talent. I'd expect him to he's got to get a fight with someone in the top 15 after that performance, right? Because a win's a win. I mean, and Bernal showed you that he's got some real potential. It's just like, it reminds me, we're bringing up Michael Chandler a lot, but I listened to his podcast with Joe Rogan and how sometimes when you get hit with like that feeling of being, you get those like octagon jitters almost, right? And I wonder if Bernal kind of got into a situation where he just like made a mental error because he was like, oh my God, I'm about to beat this guy. I mean, this guy's on a tear. I'm in the UFC. I'm about to pick up a win. I mean, this is going to launch me. Because Arnold, I'm telling you, man, he's no joke. And I kind of wonder if Bernal was playing that game in his head a little bit, like Michael Chandler talked about, like, do I deserve to win? And then it kind of bites you in the ass. Maybe not. It could be as just simple as he had his head in the wrong fucking spot. But I'm wondering what was going through his head. It'd be interesting to get his perspective on that fight because he controlled most of it and looked really fucking good. I mean, that's going to be a kid to watch out for if he can clean just a couple things up, right? Like those little mistakes too that he's made, that's what separate the upper echelon from the rest of the pack, right? Like that's what's going to get you into the top 5 is that attention to detail. And you know how some guys, like you can see someone going for a choke on some guys and you're like, they're never going to fucking get that. Right? Like you just know, you're like, you're not going to land that on that guy. You have to become that type of person if you ever want to rise up through the ranks. So just some things to clean up. And I thought it was an impressive performance for him and a good fight for both guys. Neil Magny picked up a win over Craig White, which everyone expected, right, via first-round TKO. Craig White came out. He was aggressive, and he kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, I mean, I'm trying to do these the day after because everything's a little bit more fresh in your mind, at least. It's so hard to remember the exact details of all these fights. But if I remember correctly, there was a moment in the fight where Craig White, towards the end, kind of blitzed. Like he sprinted at Magny and was trying to throw everything at him, and I was like, he might be tired. Like he might have just went through an adrenaline dump and then he got knocked out shortly afterwards because he was doing all right. And it was like, I wonder if he kind of like panicked because he felt himself getting tired and knowing, I mean, this fight was taken on 2 weeks notice. So there's no way that he was in the shape that he needed to be in to fight Neil fucking Magny. So knowing how good Magny is and knowing how his cardio is, I'm wondering if he started to feel himself fade a little bit. And then he's like, fuck man, I just got to pour it on him right now and just hope for the best. And then it kind of didn't go his way. Because he got stopped in the closing minute of the first round, I believe. Like it was like four minutes and some odd seconds in, but just kind of what we expected, right? Like Neil Magny's probably not going to lose to a guy who's making his UFC debut on short notice, especially when you're preparing for a guy like an elite level grappler like Gunnar Nelson. I know Craig White's a finisher and everything, and I think all of his wins have come via some sort of finish, whether it be a knockout or a submission, but Neil Magny's a tall fucking task for any man at 170, so no surprise there. I think Magny was probably the biggest favorite on the card, and if not, he should have been. All right, now the main card. Oh, speaking of, Craig White is probably going to get, maybe a guy like Chad LaPriest, a lower tier 170-pounder. I think with that fight, it's so important when you're a fighter fighting in like a lower organization, when the UFC calls, you see them take these crazy fights because it's a win-win for them. First off, it gets their name out there. It allows them to get into the UFC. Like they don't, a lot of the times, I mean, like they obviously want to win, but just getting into the UFC is the important part. And now, I mean, fighting a guy like Neil Magny stepping up like that, I'm sure the UFC appreciates it because he saved the fight, and I think he's probably going to earn. I don't think they're going to kick him off the roster after that now. I'm sure they're going to give him another opportunity to go out and fully prepare and see what this kid looks like when you get a full camp underneath him. So I'd expect him to be back and fighting someone in the lower end of the 170-pound division. And for Neil Magny, I'd like to see him fight Gunnar Nelson because I thought that was a really interesting matchup, especially because Neil Magny has struggled against guys who have high-level jiu-jitsu. But, we'll see. I think that's still a good fight. And it sucks for Magny because all this fight, he's got so many fights in the UFC that all this kind of this fight is going to get lost in the noise I mean, when you reflect on Neil Magny's career, this will just be another fight for him. It's not like a huge name, and it didn't really do a lot to move him forward. It was just a good fight to keep him active, right? Get him in the octagon and not allow rust to start building up. It's always good to stay active, in my opinion. So I don't think it hurts him, but I don't think it helps him. So let him fight Gunnar Nelson and see what plays out there, because that's an important fight for both Gunnar and Neil Magny. All right, let's move on to the main event between Darren Till and Stephen Thompson. And there has been a fuck ton of debate around this. And I don't know, man. So watching the fight, I mean, maybe I'm fucking crazy. I felt like Darren Till won rounds like 1 and 2. And then I thought that the clearest round for Wonderboy by a mile was round 3. I felt like Wonderboy also won round 4. And people are going to disagree with me. I know they are. Because I think, for me, okay, this is how I viewed it. Till obviously won round 5, right? I thought rounds 3 and 5 were the most clear cut. 3 for Wonderboy, 5 for Till. The other ones, I don't fucking know, man, because the way that Stephen Thompson fights, he likes to hang back. And the way I explained Darren Till's approach to this was smart aggressive. He wasn't rushing in. He wasn't throwing unnecessary shots, because if you look historically at guys who come in overly aggressive against Wonderboy Thompson, they get fucked up. You have to keep your composure. You can't get too aggressive. You can't go storming in and throwing all these like ill-advised shots, because he's going to make you pay for them. So for the first round, I felt like not a lot happened for either guy in the first round. It's not like they either, like, I mean, maybe, I don't even know. I've heard some reports say that Wonderboy definitely outstruck him, and then I've seen other stat sheets that say that Darren Till landed more significant strikes throughout the fight. But my point is, none of them landed anything really, really meaningful until the 5th round, when Darren Till landed that left that dropped Wonderboy. That won him the round, hands down. I don't care what Wonderboy, like, if he landed that takedown that Till shot right back up from, Till won the 5th. And I feel like in the 3rd round, Wonderboy is really starting to get his timing down. But for the first round, if you know that Wonderboy's game plan is to, everyone in the world knows this, he's going to hang back and wait to counter you, right? Unless you're backing up away from him like Woodley did, putting his back on the cage. I don't think that was smart at all on Woodley's end. But, I mean, Woodley won both fights, so what the fuck do I know? But regardless, Wonderboy's going to hang back and wait to counter. So if no real significant damage has been landed by either fighter, and you know that Wonderboy's plan is to sit back and counter, and that Darren Till's job is to move forward, but none of them really land, who's winning? In my opinion, it's the guy who's controlling the octagon, which is Darren Till. I gave him the first round. Some of it's going to get lost because 25-minute fights are long fights, but I thought that Darren Till won rounds 1, 2, and 5. I just think that too many people are getting hung up on like the amount of shots. They're like, oh, well, Wonderboy landed more. And I'm like, yeah, but Wonderboy didn't exactly get to implement his game plan the way he wanted to. I mean, it was indicated by the way that Darren Till's face looked after. Not that Darren Till did anything of, I mean, like he dropped him in the 5th, like I said, but it's not like he did major damage to Wonderboy. So I don't know, man. For me, I felt like Darren Till won the fight. I didn't think it was like, I would have completely understood if they had given it to Wonderboy. This is another one like the Jason Knight and Americana fight. I could kind of get if you were, Americana is probably a little more decisive, just because traditionally we give fights to guys who spend more time on top, right? But I mean, this is a tough fucking fight to score, and everyone's acting like it's this massive robbery, and I disagree. I mean, I just don't see how you can watch that fight and tell me that you really think Stephen Thompson won the fight. I don't know that either guy won the fight. But when I was watching the aftermath show, and you saw everyone, or like FS1, the post-fight show or whatever, and everyone's like, oh, bullshit, that's bullshit. Like Michael Chiesa and stuff. And I didn't think so, man. I was like, to me, when they read out the scores, I was like, oh, he's in Liverpool, man. This fight's going to Darren Till. Hands down. He dictated where the fight took place, and when no one's landing meaningful shots, the judges are going to look at who's pressing forward. And 100%, when Darren Till landed and Liverpool blew up, the whole crowd was like, oh, fuck. You know, they're going to, that matters to the judges. They're going to hear that, and those shots seem, the impact of those are multiplied. You know, I don't even know by what, tenfold, right? Like, when you have a crowd behind you and you're landing just a little jab and shit. And also, I felt like Darren Till, I forget what round it was. Maybe it was the 5th, which would kind of be a moot point, right? But there was a round where Darren Till was really getting his jab with his lead hand going, with his right hand, and snapping Wonderboy's head back on a couple. I don't know how you look at that fight and tell me that, you know, you thought it was a clear-cut decision win for Stephen Thompson. Now, the other controversy surrounding this is the fact that Darren Till missed weight, and he kind of missed it by a lot. I mean, he's 4.5 pounds over championship weight and 3.5 pounds over the 171-pound limit. So, I mean, that's a big fucking deal. He's got to get that, and I think he knows that. If you watch him in the interviews after the press in the press conference, he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "I don't deserve a title shot right now," and he's kind of right. I mean, like, I like the fact that he was real about it because he missed weight, but if this is going to be a recurring issue with him, he's a big enough guy that I think he can fend for himself at 185 pounds. I just think he wants to run through the people at 170 because he's been doing such a good job of it so far. So for me, like I said, though, don't get me wrong. It's not like I thought Darren Till won this clear-cut decision and it was like a blowout on his end. But watching that fight, man, I thought a lot of what Stephen Thompson, like I said, I felt like Darren Till wanted to fight smart, aggressive, and Stephen Thompson wanted to fight the counter game. And when neither guy is really, I mean, Darren Till was the one marching forward, and Thompson, I mean, like, he was getting off some stuff, but it's not like it was anything significant or anything that was making you go, wow, he rocked him. Like, he hit him with a couple of nice shots, but Till hit him with a couple of nice shots. So to me, I mean, when you look at wrestlers, right, what we always say about wrestlers is one of their biggest advantages in fighting is the fact that they're able to dictate where the fights take place. Like, they can take you to the ground and put you there. So for me, I mean, this is the argument you get in with Dominic Cruz too. Like, when TJ Dillashaw was marching Dominic Cruz down, to me, he was playing into Dominic Cruz's hands because Dominic Cruz likes to move backwards and make you miss. But there's an argument that TJ was controlling much of the octagon too, right? Like, this is kind of a similar situation to that, to be honest with you. But not as much volume was being thrown. So when there's not, this is a tough fucking fight. You know, I like I said, I don't want to sit there and tell you that Darren Till got a clear-cut decision win from Stephen Thompson, but if I'm judging that fight, I really think I'm giving it to him. I don't think that you can be outraged by this. The thing that you should be outraged about is the fact that Darren Till missed weight, and I think he's aware of it, and he's got to look for a way to, you know, I don't know whether it's going to be lowering his weight or just figuring out a more efficient way to cut, or he's got to lose some body mass. I don't know. That's the thing to be upset about this, not the decision. This was a tough fucking call. What I will say, though, is I don't think that Darren Till won 4 rounds. Like, some of those judges' scorecards were completely fucked. Like, 49-46 didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But the 48-47 card did. If I was judging that fight, I'd be giving it to Till. So I don't think you can be too harsh on the judges. But I think it's getting blown out. I think the robbery aspect of this fight is getting blown out of proportion a little bit. Anyway, let's fucking move on. What's going to be next for Wonderboy? Man, I don't know. Probably the loser of RDA versus Covington. And for Darren Till, because what's probably going to happen is whoever wins that fight, whether it be Rafael dos Anjos or Colby Covington, they're probably going to fight Tyron Woodley for the title. And the loser of that is probably going to fight Wonderboy, I would imagine. And Darren Till is probably going to end up fighting Kamaru Usman, because he's coming off a win over Damian Maia, and there's a lot of hype around him. He's actually won more fights in the UFC. He's won like 8 in a row, whereas Darren Till, I think, has won 4 or 5. So Kamaru Usman actually has more UFC experience than Darren Till, and I think that these are two of the most promising prospects in 170 pounds. I don't think there's any debating that. As far as their youth and their ability and everything, I think these are the two guys that you have to make fight. And I know that Darren Till was saying in the interview or the press conference that he thinks Stephen Thompson should get, you know, Kamaru Usman or RDA or Covington, but the win still is going to matter to the UFC in my eyes. It's very hard to give Stephen Thompson, you know, Kamaru Usman for a title eliminator when you've got Darren Till there who just beat him. So I would expect the fight that gets made next to be Darren Till versus Kamaru Usman, and Stephen Thompson's either going to fight Rafael dos Anjos or Colby Covington, depending on who wins. All right, 3 biggest takeaways. Like I said, like I just harped on, I mean, in my incoherent rant a couple minutes ago, Darren Till did a good job of staying smart aggressive. I really think that's why he won the fight. If you have a fight where not a lot of action's taking place, it's more than likely going to go to the guy controlling the octagon. And I know the argument from a lot of people is going to be that, well, they just don't understand Wonderboy's game plan. They don't understand what he's trying to do. He's a counter fighter. I know, but it's not like he was countering insanely effectively. You know, it's not like when they got into these exchanges, you were going, oh, man, Wonderboy's really teeing off on him now. He never had a moment like that. Very tough fight to score, and I thought it was I don't think it was a crazy one-sided win, but if I'm scoring that fight, I think I'm giving it to Till too. So, I don't know. I thought he did a good job of staying aggressive while being smart. You don't want to start getting into a brawl with Wonderboy because he makes you pay for tiny mistakes. I mean, the littlest mistakes he'll make you pay for. So when you start getting into a brawl and overextending on punches and not setting things up anymore, that's when he really starts teeing off on people. That's when he has most of his success. Second takeaway, Darren Stewart just maybe saved his UFC career in a fight that he looked phenomenal in. He said afterwards, like, he got emotional and stuff. He's like, I deserve to be here, and he's absolutely right. I mean, he just beat a guy in Eric Spicely who, like I said, is no fucking slouch, and he's very good on the ground. Was comfortable wherever the fight took place, exemplified. I mean, put a striking clinic on Spicely, looked really good. So he just did a lot to save his career, man. I think he just earned himself another fight in the UFC, especially with a finish win. Like a statement win like that after losing 3 in a row, that's a big fucking deal. Congratulations to him. And number 3, Jason Knight is in a must-win situation right now. Like I said, he's a tough guy because, man, you don't want to boot a guy with that kind of talent and potential off of the UFC roster because he's exciting and he puts asses in the seats, right? But he's in a must-win spot, man. You can't drop 4 in a row in the UFC. No matter how good you are, I don't know if they'll hold on to you after that. So I'd expect him to get another chance, and they'll probably give him a little bit of a lower-level guy because they realize that his excitement. They'll give him a fight that he's going to be a big favorite in. So up to him to go out and perform. And, hopefully he sticks around in the UFC because I fucking love to watch him fight. And to me, that was the most intriguing fight of the night. Obviously, after it played out, I thought it was the most exciting and interesting fight because not a lot of action happened in Darren Till versus Wonderboy. That was the fight that you were most excited about, right? Because you were seeing and make no mistake, what you witnessed in that fight were 2 of the most elite strikers in the division, like maybe the highest level of striking that we've ever seen step into the octagon and face off. So they were playing a lot of cat and mouse, a lot of games. And Dan Hardy, I think, he said at one point during the commentary, and I think he was right, you feel like you need another 5 rounds. And that fight, to me, it was different than, it was different in the sense that you felt like someone was going to land something that drastically changed the outcome of the fight, or someone was going to get put away. Like, you felt like there was it was building to something, right? And it just kind of never did. I mean, Till landed that big left hand, but Wonderboy was able to recover from it. So, I don't know. Anyway, Jason Knight, yeah, he's got to pick up a win in his next fight. He's in a kind of a tough spot now, and some of it's not his fault, like getting thrown guys like Ricardo Lamas too soon. It's a lot to handle, but I'd like to see this guy stick around the UFC roster because I still think he has a ton of talent and a ton of potential. So, all right, so I think that's going to wrap everything up. We got fights on Friday, so we got a short week because normally your fights are always on Saturday, but we had one this past weekend on Sunday, and now we got one on Friday night. It's headlined by and it's a great card because I think like Sam Alvey's on it, a couple other big names are on it, but Jimmy Rivera and Marlon Moraes are fighting, and these are 2 of the, absolute best fighters in the 135-pound division. This might be a title eliminator shot. These 2 are so fucking good. Jimmy Rivera's only lost like 1 fight, and he's run through a lot of the 135-pound division. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out because I'd expect the winner to get the winner of TJ Cody. So we'll see. That's going to be a fun one to break down. I'm excited for it, and I think I'll probably roll that out on Thursday, what is Thursday's date? The 31st? I'll probably put the dissection show out for that on the 31st and break that card down. But all right, that does it for me, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to, subscribe, like, dislike, Whatever the fuck you want to do. If you don't like the show, don't fucking give it a thumbs up. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll catch you later. Bye.